All right. Thanks everybody for being here. I am Representative Kelly Moller. I represent District 40A, Shoreview, Arden Hills, Mounds View, and New Brighton. And House File 1989 is the Ticketing Fairness Act. It's a bill I started working on over a year ago after the ticketing debacle when Taylor Swift Eras Tour tickets went on sale. Being a Swiftie, I was excited to get tickets to go to the show and also to take my niece with me. And like other Swifties, I signed up in advance to get to be a verified fan and get that pre-sale code. We were told that that code was going to be able to help us get tickets and reduce scalpers getting tickets. Unfortunately, I and many others never received that code and were unable to purchase tickets. For those people who did receive the pre-sale code, the process was an utter disaster. Some people, like my friend Melissa, waited in a virtual queue all day long, and when she finally got to the point where she was ready to select her tickets, she got booted out and had to start all over again in that virtual queue. Others I know were lucky enough to get through and the tickets were outrageously priced. I know a young woman named Laura who had put a personal cap on the amount she wanted to spend on a ticket at $500. And then she was stunned when she made it all the way through to the end and found out there was $100 in fees added on to that $500 ticket. But of course she didn't want to back out at that point and select cheaper tickets because she's afraid she would not be able to get any tickets if she did that. So while the T-Swift ticketing fiasco showed that there are many problems with the ticketing industry, but anyone who's purchased any kind of tickets recently knows that it was not an isolated event. Last year, for example, I purchased tickets to the women's Big Ten basketball tournament in Minneapolis to see the Iowa women basketball play and Caitlin Clark, and I paid an 83% increase in the cost of the tickets for the fees. After House File 1989 was introduced last year, Senator Klein and I worked diligently with numerous stakeholders, including a lot of the different sports teams in the area and venues, both large and small, and we put together this bill to create the best possible bill for Minnesota's consumers. The Ticketing Fairness Act does the following things. It requires all-in pricing whenever a ticket is sold or resold, so this allows consumers to know upfront what the total cost of the ticket is going to be before they get to that very end screen and have only a couple minutes to make a decision. It ensures that consumers will also receive proof of purchase of their tickets within 24 hours, and they'll be informed about the refund policy. It prevents the use of deceptive websites that trick consumers into thinking that those websites are those of the actual venue or the original seller of the tickets. It bans speculative ticketing, which is the process used in the resale market to sell tickets that haven't even gone on sale yet and are not in the possession of the reseller. It prohibits the use of bots to purchase tickets and other unfair practices that put tickets in the hands of scalpers over consumers. One of the great things about living in Minnesota is that we have wonderful entertainment opportunities, from concerts to theater performances to sporting events. The Ticketing Fairness Act seeks to provide a fair and transparent process for Minnesotans so that they can enjoy these events. Thank you.
Well, good afternoon. I am glad to be here with you talking about our junk fees ban bill that's hitting the House floor today. The bill, and as we talked about ticketing, we're going to talk about a lot of different kinds of junk fees. This bill would make our market fairer for consumers, for small businesses, more competitive by providing price transparency and competition. Junk fees are showing up everywhere, and not just for Taylor Swift tickets anymore. They are really impossible to avoid at this point. They're hurting consumers. They're distorting our markets. 85% of Minnesotans report having encountered a junk fee. That probably means most of us in this room. Think about the last time you bought something online, an airline ticket, a hotel room, tickets for an opening day for the Twins, a new phone. Was the price that you paid the one that you saw when you started that transaction? And when you went out for dinner or got your food delivered, what fees were added onto your check before you were told the full price that you would pay. Senator Port and I have been working on this. They're on the floor, and so she isn't able to be here. But since we've been working on this, we've been collecting a lot of receipts, and lots of people have been sending us their receipts. And it will amaze you how pervasive these junk fees are. Sometimes they're called convenience fees, wellness fees, resort fees, service and processing fees, handling fees, connection fees, facilities fees, and a new one this week, an inflation fee. But call them what you want. They're just another way for corporations to use anti-competitive practices that raise the cost of a good or service and squeeze all of us. And so we're doing today, we are going to hear on the floor my bill that adds language into the Minnesota Deceptive Practices Act to prohibit sellers from advertising prices and goods and services that don't include all of the mandatory fees or surcharges. To comply, it simply requires that advertisers, that folks advertising their product include the listed price, includes everything that people are required to pay to get that product. It does not tell companies what they can charge, how they can charge it, and it does not prevent them from adding add-ons or upselling. The language provides one default rule and a few accommodations for some of the unique needs of our digital and service industries. It was crafted with a lot of conversation and input from industries, from experts, from business advocates, and most importantly, from Minnesota consumers who will ultimately pay the tab. And I will just end by noting about what else we're hearing on the floor today, because I think it's important that as we talk about banning this exploitive ticketing and junk fees, we're also talking about the House labor bill. And one of the things it does is eliminating minimum wage carve-outs and practices like shadow non-competes that depress wages. And the reason I think that these things are connected is that Minnesotans are being nickeled and dimed, often overcharged, and underpaid at the cash register, hospital, online checkout, and their paychecks and pretty much everywhere else. And so as we are thinking about the work we're doing this session, we are looking at corporate power and profits that are soaring, and we're looking at working families who are being squeezed by these industries that put profits over people, and abusive practices that hurt consumers and hurt other businesses in the market. So it's time for a change, and I think these bills are part of that work of making sure that we have, we're taking on the anti-competitive practices and those things that are making our markets not fair or transparent, and that are raising costs, they're hurting workers, and they're squeezing small businesses, farmers, and you name it. So with that, I think that Representative Moller and I will take any questions. I will note we have been working both with our Senate partners, with Senator Klein and Senator Port, and they just can't be here today because the floor, so.
Well, so the restaurant one, does that mean that restaurants couldn't charge those wellness fees if they want to do that, that has to be incorporated into the price of the food, or?
Yes, and we have, so this bill is a one sort of default standard across industries, and so it doesn't just apply to restaurants, but in the hospitality place you raised, we see it called either a wellness fee, sometimes it's called a convenience fee, sometimes it's called a service fee, and one of the things that I've heard from servers directly is that even though there's language that's statutorily required, people oftentimes, especially when they're 10% or so, think it might be a tip. And so some of the reason we think this is important is for consumers, but it's also important for those servers who may see their tips decline because of deceptive, the wellness fee or whatever you'd like to call it.
To continue on the example of the hospitality industry, specifically restaurants, for instance, what does upfront disclosure look like? Is that putting something on the menu that says, hey, we'll charge this fee at the end? Is that including it on the prices on the menu? What might that, look like?
Yeah, and again, it'll work the same wherever you go. If it's something that is mandatory to purchasing the good, in this case, getting the menu items, it should be in the menu price. You're welcome to, and we've had some questions about telling people what's in that price, but the price that folks see, you know, I had somebody who runs a restaurant say, well, we're worried people don't want to pay $30 for a hamburger. And the reality is people are paying $30 for a hamburger. They just are being told that they're being paid $27 and then there's $3 after they've consumed the meal. And so what this would mean is, say, if you go to a restaurant, you would know the price. And the only thing sort of left over would be the taxes, and that would be the same no matter where you go in that city. So you could compare the $27 hamburger to the $15 hamburger to the $30 hamburger and know that you're actually comparing apples to apples.
So do those fees that you found on the receipts, are they generally a flat fee, or are they based on the size of the main ticket, like a tax would be?
You're really making me regret not bringing the stack because we can't have props on the floor, and so I didn't bring it. They look a lot of different ways. It sort of depends on the industry. And so I will say that I was actually sitting in committee earlier, and my colleague, who I serve with, said just yesterday they were paying their bill for the rent of their apartment in the cities, and they had a $63 convenience fee. And that was a flat fee. I think a lot of times you'll see it'll be a percentage of the meal if it's a restaurant. And again, I will say, once you start looking at these, you see them everywhere. It's not just in the industry we've talked about. It is in, you know, car rentals, and it is in both prices, services. I had someone talk to me about a local shop that was doing it at the end of the car repair, sort of at the end. And so I think that one of the reasons we want to do this, and one of the reasons that, you know, the ticketing bill is really specific to that industry and a lot of the most abusive practices. And what we want to make sure is that, one, those things don't spread, and two, that there's just one clear, transparent, all-inclusive price when consumers are going to pay.
In reading the bill, I remember there were some, not exceptions, but different rules for like food delivery companies. What do those look like, and why are those important to include separate from the other ones?
Yeah, so we are accommodating the fact that there's slightly different pricing models when you're talking like food delivery. The menu is actually a third party, right? So it's the menu, prices are from the restaurant that you're delivering, but there are really two services being provided. There's what the platform is providing, and that needs to be fair, transparent, upfront, and you tell the folks, and then there's the menu prices. And we think that fits consumers' expectation. It didn't seem feasible to say, well, the platforms are now gonna have to work with the third-party vendors to sort of incorporate into the price the same way you would if it's your own restaurant. But we do think, and I will say that food delivery is something we hear about all the time. I mean, I use Grubhub and DoorDash, and the way there's been some sort of different ways of doing it, but there's a delivery fee and then a service fee, and sometimes the service fees and the taxes. Like, that is all deceptive. And so people should be able to compare what Grubhub is offering and what Uber Eats, and hopefully a local folks, and DoorDash. You should be able to know how much that service is costing you. And that's why we structured that the way that we did.
Who'd you guys bring with you today, and why they're standing behind you?
We have a number of folks here today who've had their own experience getting tickets, or just, you know, fans. I think we've all had these issues, whether it's going to concerts or sporting events. We've got another Taylor Swift fan here. It's just to reflect that, and we have someone with bank fees, just to reflect that this is impacting a lot of Minnesotans. It's not just us politicians talking about this issue, that this really does impact all of Minnesota consumers.
Where did you see that inflation fee?
I will have to get, that was emailed to me, and it was in the last week, so I can, I think it was at I think it was hospitality of some sort. I don't know if it was a restaurant, or if it was, you know, I've seen this, there's a 4.5% fee at the airport when I was buying a bottle of water, so you'll see that too. I'm happy to get back to you. I have gotten so many, and that's the thing. I mean, once you start looking at this, it is really hard not to find them everywhere, but I will get back to you on where that inflation fee was.
On House File 1989, A lot of these tickets that you're purchasing are purchased through national vendors. I can remember when Pearl Jam was trying to address this in the 1990s. What can a state actually do that is largely dictated by what national vendors are doing?
Yeah, I mean, I will tell you that the national vendors were involved in the discussion here, and I think one of the common themes that I heard was, we just want everybody to be on the same playing field. If I have to show this fee, it's to what Representative Greenman was talking to. If I'm gonna show the price of a good, I want everybody else selling similar goods to have to show their total price. So for us, it's that all-in pricing, the banning the speculative tickets, which is really bad for consumers because they may be selling tickets that don't actually exist, and then you find out you don't actually have tickets to a thing. Those are things that we can do in the state. There are larger issues with monopolies, and I know Senator Klobuchar has been looking at this issue in Congress. So like it's a both and scenario where there are concrete things we can do in the state. And I'll say too, our legislation was modeled after other states who have already done similar things, like New York and Nevada. I think maybe Maryland just passed a bill, and I know other bills are moving in other states. So we can very much do things here to make the process better for consumers here and work to get bills passed in Congress to address some of the larger issues as well.
Also talk a little bit about the importance of allowing private action in the aspects of your bill.
Yeah, so our bill it doesn't call out the Attorney General's office because the Attorney General has the authority to enforce this law under their statutory authority under Chapter 8. But with that comes a civil private right of action. So if the AG has enforcement authority, then a person also has a civil right, a private right of action that goes along with that Chapter 8 authority. So that's why you don't see it specified in the bill. It already exists in statute. And then I'll add too that one thing we added was the Department of Commerce, the ability to get information from those online ticket marketplaces to find out if bots are being used, because we're hearing a lot from the industry that like, oh, yes, they're bots, we're trying to take care of it, we're taking care of it. And if we're seeing that it's a problem, like we want the state to be able to know and find out if bots are being used frequently in Minnesota, for what events and how frequently.
In your conversations with stakeholders, I mean, is that something that is easy to track? I mean, I would imagine it's difficult to tell how many bots are actually purchasing up these tickets.
Yeah, I mean, the industry will tell you that they are like constantly on it and they're taking care of it, and that's one reason why we want the Commerce Department to be able to get a little more information about that, because I don't think it's as transparent as we would like, or we don't have all the data that we would like on that.
Anybody here want to talk about their ticket buying experience, or?
What about the Taylor Swift fan with the sunglasses?
No comment.
How was the concert?
Did you go? No.
She's just a fan.
Anyone here want to talk about a problem you've had buying tickets, or the surprise fee at the end of the line?
Sure, I can share. My name is Mike Dean. I'm actually the executive director of North Star Prosperity. We're one of the groups that have been supporting the bill. I testified in committee, both the House and Senate, sort of sharing my experience. And part of it was taking my daughter to the Big Ten tournament. As you can see, she's a huge Caitlin Clark fan, and she loves playing basketball. She actually went to a Lynx game as a 4-year-old and has just been hooked on women's basketball really ever since. And so a few months ago, she came to me and said, I really want to go to the Big Ten tournament. And so I just couldn't refuse as a father. And so went online, started the process of purchasing the tickets. They said they were $75. And then by the time I got to the end, they ended up being almost $130 with, I think it was 4 to 5 different types of service fees, convenience fees, all these sorts of different things that really don't provide any value to the consumer, but fundamentally just charged me more money. And by the time I got to the end, I think I paid $500 for 4 tickets, and I took her and her friends too. And so I think this is the problem from a consumer's perspective. On average, Minnesotans spend about $3,000 a year on junk fees, and that's just astronomical. So we're really excited about this bill moving forward because it's really going to save Minnesotans money as part of this process.
So if the fees have been disclosed up front and you knew up front how expensive it would be, would you have still bought them?
I would have made different decisions. Quite honestly, she wouldn't have been able to bring 2 friends. So, but that's the reality. I mean, that's the problem with this situation is like you budget, and we're trying to be wise with our money, but they're not sharing the exact amount up front. And so you see consumers that they've actually done studies on this, and by the time you get to the end, you're kind of sucked in. You've already spent the time, invested it. You're worried about losing tickets because somebody else might grab them where you maybe would have chosen 2 tickets instead of 4. And so you're sort of, you have no choice really at that. And that's just anti-capitalist, quite honestly. And so this is just a really great consumer bill that I think is just going to save Minnesotans a lot of money in the end.
States require disclosure on either ticketing or on junk fees or on both. Do you guys know?
I think we will be the second. And there is, and I think that this is a reflection of, we are one of, I think, almost a dozen, between 6 and 10 that are thinking about it this year. 12, thank you. As well as at the federal level, they're thinking about it. And I think that that's a reflection also of just how this is, just has ballooned. And the thing I've heard from some businesses, and to that point of having one rule that applies to everybody is really important, because the competitive nature of, if your competitor is allowed to do it and is doing it, even if you don't want to, and didn't that happen with, didn't StubHub, there was some, StubHub tried to just go to a model that is friendlier to consumers. That's what people want. But I think that's sort of in the brain science, how we all think about it. And I have definitely done this, right? As a hotel, and you're like, I know that there's a resort fee at the end, but I'm still gonna go to the cheaper sticker price. And so I think that that is now, as we see corporate consolidation, as we see a lot of things, it's just growing. And so I think that part of what you're seeing with states and our response is we're hearing about it a lot, and so we're taking action around the same time.
Which is the one state that's done already?
California.
Chair Moller, during the committee hearing, one of the committee hearings on this, there were a lot of Taylor Swift song title puns. Would we expect that today, or is that barred by House rules?
I don't believe that it is barred by House rules. And I didn't, if you came for those lyrics today, you'd be sadly disappointed, because you know I didn't weave those into my presentation. I am not planning on doing it, but if it happens naturally, I will definitely let that happen. And, props to Chair Becker-Finn, because she really went deep on the song lyrics. We had a lot of fun in that committee. The Commerce Committee wasn't as much fun. They really didn't get into it, but I'm definitely open to it today. Yeah, I shook that off, and so we'll see what happens on the floor.
Is that it?
Thanks, everyone.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Come to the floor and see if